out here and see what Doug's up to. Supposed to be putting the motor together, but who knows? Let's check it out. Hey man, what's up?
Oh, nothing. Just getting this motor cleaned up, getting ready to throw these 18-to-1 badass pistons in this 638 cubic inch Chevy motor. Last video, I showed everybody how to get the crankshaft in. I went ahead and showed them how to get the bearings in. I showed them the torque sequences, torque specs. I showed them how to set the in-play on the thrust bearing here, which is very important. We had to do it about 2 or 3 times to get ours right, but it is right. So check out that video if you haven't seen it yet. In this video, we will be putting in these pistons. I will show you the steps of how to get them on the rods, how to file the rings, how to set your bearing clearances, how to torque them down properly, and I will be showing you. That's it. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. First thing you want to do is make sure everything's cleaned up, and then you're going to want to take a Sharpie and you're going to want to write on your piston a 1, a 2, a 3 for each cylinder all the way to number 8. That way when you put it in, you make sure that your valve reliefs and everything's up correctly in the right position and you don't have it in backwards or something like that. Another reason you're going to want to do that is because when you put your rod on, you're going to want to make sure your chamfered in here is going to be lined up with the fillet on the crank here. So you're going to want your chamfered in on the fillet. You're going to want your flat side on the inside, and on this one it's going to be same thing, chamfered on the outside, solid side on the inside, touching each other. Alright, so you're going to want to keep that in mind when you're installing your piston on your connecting rod. And now, to get your piston on your connecting rod, which mine already is, you're going to have a wrist pin here. And what you're going to want to do, most of them are spiral locks. These ones here are a floater pin with these bushings that hold it in with the oil rail and the cylinder wall there. But most of them have a spiral lock, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to slide a spiral lock on one side. Then you want to take your wrist pin and your rod and you're going to want to put it up and you're going to want to slide it in with lubricant on your wrist pin. And then you're going to come on the other side, slide the spiral lock in, and then that is how you get the rod on the piston there. Pretty simple. Just make sure it's lubed up because parts will be rotating. So, and with these ones here, with the bushing style, you probably got to install your oil rail and your support there, just to hold all the pins in. All right, now that we got our rods on our pistons, I'm oiling down the cylinder walls. I use 30 weight break-in oil in this squirt can here, and now that we got that done, we're ready to start filing our rings. It's very important to file the rings. It's important because everything gets really hot in there and thermal expansion happens, and then your rings are going to start touching each other, and then eventually they have nowhere to go and they're going to touch each other and they got to go somewhere, and most of the time they snap the edge off the piston, which I got one on the table here. You can show everybody while I'm finishing doing this oil here. And then I got a ring sitting over here and I'll slide one in. And I've already filed my rings and they are ready to go, but I'll slide one in. I'll show you how to use the filler gauge to measure. And most of the time your ring kit's going to come with a set of instructions and they will give you an equation to use, which usually it's your bore space times whatever number. Mine is 0.007, so it's 4.625 times 0.007, and that came out to 32 thousandths. So my top ring I have set at 32 thousandths. My second ring I have set at 30 thousandths, and that is for a heavy nitrous use motor. If it's just a street motor, you can get away with running tighter ring gaps. Now we're ready to put our piston ring in. We're ready to file it down and get it in there. On the piston rings here, they are marked. They have writing on them and a dot. I can't seem to find this one here. So there's a little dot. That's going to be up. That's going to be facing towards the heads on the motor here. So what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to take your piston ring. You're going to want to slide it in like this with your thumbs. Make sure it's in there straight. Then you're going to want to take, if you got an old piston laying around, that's what I use. I take the rings off of it and I'll just use this to slide it in a little bit down in there, make sure everything's even. If it's not even, your reading will be off. If you don't have an old piston, you can use a new one. You just got to be a little more careful. So then you're going to want to take your filler gauge, and for us, we're going to set it to 32 thousandths. So we're going to look on here, Find 32 thousandths. Boom, there it is. And then what you're going to do, now you see your gap here, you're going to want to take this 32 thousandths, you're going to want to slide it into there, and you're going to want to make sure that, might be a little off here, that it just slides in just perfect. If it's too tight, then it's too tight. If it's too loose, probably not going to hurt you. I would rather have it a little loose than a little tight, but that's just me. Okay, and that's how you check your gap. If you still need to file your piston rings, you're going to want to use a file and go one direction, or you can go and pick one of these up at Jegs or Summit or anywhere, just a cheap little piston ring filer. You bolt it to the table, and then you're going to want to put it on here just like this, and you're going to want to go just one way, usually towards you. Don't go two ways. And then after you're done with that, you're going to want to make sure that there's no sharp edges on or burrs on either side, but don't be grinding away the edge of the ring either, because that can hurt the performance and have a little more gap than you would like right there. Okay, and a little tip that I've learned was to take a Sharpie and mark the edge of the ring here. That way, when you're filing, you have a little reference to go off of how much you're taking away. Okay, now we're ready to throw the rings on the pistons here. You're going to want to start from the bottom up, and you're going to want to put your oil ring in first, and you just put it on there, and it's the easiest one. It'll come all the way wrap around, and it doesn't matter about where you put it on at first, but you're going to want to try to clock it up between 11 and 1. And then you're going to want to put your oil support rings on, which are the two thin ones in between there. Start at the bottom one. You're going to want to put it on, and then you're going to want to put your next one on. Then after that, you're going to go to your second ring here, which is usually the darker ring. And like I said, there is a mark on there in writing. Make sure the dot is pointed towards the top of the piston. And then you're going to want to put your top ring on after that. And the way you want to put these rings on is, you can either one way, which most people don't recommend, but you can put it on like that and come around and just make sure not to scratch it. Or they make a tool, which is a piston ring opener here. So we got our dot up. You just stick them in there, and you just open it up just enough to get into that top ring there, top ring groove, and just let it go in. Make sure it is in properly. And that is how you put your rings on. And now when you go to put your rings in the motor, you're going to want to make sure it goes how it is in the motor. And then for, like I said, the oil support ring, the middle one here, you're going to want to clock it between 1 and 2 o'clock. And there's little oil holes here. I like to just make sure that the rail is not covering them and they're just open. It's kind of hard because they're all a little different. But in the next ring, you're going to want to put one of these at 10 o'clock, and you're going to want to put the top one at 4 o'clock, just off of here in this area. So I put this one at 10. If I put this one at 10, this one will be over here at 4 o'clock. And then the second ring, you're going to want to put it at 6 o'clock, so the gap will be all the way down here lined up with the rod at the bottom of the motor. And the top ring, you're going to want to position it at 12 o'clock, so the gap's up here, and that is how you position your rings. Alright, now that we got the piston all ready to go into the engine, we're going to go ahead and throw the bearings in. These bearings are marked upper and lower. The cap side is going to be your lower. The piston rod side is going to be your upper. So you're going to want to make sure that it's correct, because it has this little tab here, and you're going to want to put the tab into the tab. Push it down in. Make sure it's flush on each side, so you're good to go there. We ordered a X bearing and a narrow bearing as well. So the X on the end of a part number means it's 1/1000 thinner, which is going to give you a little bit more clearance. They also make oversized bearings and stuff like that. That's going to be a little tighter if you have a little material taken out of your crank. So now that you got that in, what you're going to want to do is get your piston, and you're going to want to oil everything up. You're going to want to oil your wrist pin. Make sure it has plenty of oil, even though you probably lubricated it, but just make sure. You want to put it around everything. I like to put a little bit in here, and then I'll go ahead and I'll wipe it all around to where everything's good to go there. And then with the bearing, I'll use a little bit of assembly lube, and I'll put it on the bearing. So now that you got everything oiled up, your bearings are in. You're ready to slide it into the motor. I highly recommend one of these piston ring. It tapers down to go in there, and that way you don't have to mess with all those clamp ones and end up having it too tight or not loose and breaking your ring on the edge of the block. So what you want to do is you want to lube this up with some oil here. Just go ahead and make sure it's all lubed up. You're gonna come over to your engine. You're gonna sit it there, flush into your cylinder there. Should just sit in there. It has a little tab to sit there. So then you're gonna want to come over with your piston. You're gonna want to make sure that it is correct. It's upright. You're gonna make sure all your rings, because sometimes they get moved around when you are oiling it up. So you got your lube on. So I like to take my hands. I like to kind of compress the rings a little bit, and I'll just slide it in here. And you make sure your crankshaft and your cylinder walls are lubed up. I just use oil on those. So now that you got that dropped in, it kind of fell in. You'll go down here. You're going to clock your crankshaft to be in the center of the, which I'll show you the other way. And then you're just going to push it down in. Make sure not to hit your crankshaft. All right. And sometimes it gets hung up there. As long as it's not, you can take a rubber mallet and you can use the edge of it and just lightly tap it down in there. And if you're having some problems, it's probably hitting the ring on the edge of the block. You want to stop, because you can damage your oil rings. They're really thin, easy to damage. And you make sure everything's in here straight, your bearings on. You got it down in there. Nope, we do not. Oh, there we go. All right, looks like we're having a... Oh, there it went. All right. So usually, the way I do it, which I'll go ahead and show you guys here, I will turn the engine upside down and I'll come up through the bottom. That way I can see the rod. The only problem with that is the rod. Sometimes if you can't get your hand in there, we'll ride down the cylinder wall, which you don't want that, but it's easier to do when you're just doing it by yourself. So I'll go ahead and flip this over. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys the way I like to do things. I got the motor flipped over here. I got the crankshaft turned to the top here. I got my piston, everything's ready to go. My rings are where they need to be. Bearings are lubed up. I like to take my ring compressor. I like to take it with my piston here on the table. I'll take it, I'll move it up, and I'll slide it down over the rings like this. So it's flush on the table. I'll pick it up. Oh, and don't do that. Happened because I'm on camera. So all right, so we got that. Turn it upside down. I like to get it down into the ring compressor a little bit to where the skirts are coming out, and I'll take it over to the engine. This is number 2, so remember, number 2 is going to be on the opposite side since it's flipped upside down. You're going to want to look at your rod. You're going to make sure that your chamfered end is going to be on the flayed end and your solid end on there, like I said before. Then what I do is I come up in here and I gently slide it in there because it is riding down the cylinder wall. I'll get the sleeves there. I'll come up. I'll make sure my rod is straight in there to be coming up, and I'll boom right to it. You catch your ring compressor. Everything's good to go. And now if you need to check your bearing clearances, if you haven't done it yet, you can do it without putting the rings on. You can use WD-40 or whatever in your cylinder wall. No oil or nothing on your bearings. And you're going to take your plasti gauge here. It's going to have a piece of plastic like string. You're going to want to cut a little bit off to the size of your bearing. You're going to want to cut it off. You're going to want to lay it in there straight across where you can. Then you're going to want to come back with your cap, and you're going to want to put your cap on, and you're going to want to finger tighten the bolts, and you're going to want to torque it to torque specs, which we'll go over that here in a second. And then you're going to want to take it all back apart. And then each one of these, I got it cut down here. Just to make it simple. That whole thing, each one of these is 100 thousandths. So you have a little green, there's 100 thousandths, and you have a 200 thousandths, 300 thousandths, and I believe a 1500ths. So after you got that off and your piece of plastic there smashed on there, it's going to give you a little bit. You're going to want to take this gauge, you want to go up to it and match up which one is the best match for that. And then you're going to know that you're at 2 thousandths or 3 thousandths or whatever you're at. This motor is set at 2.5 thousandths for the rods, and we're at 3 thousandths on the crank here. So that's where we're at. Now we're going to go ahead and throw the cap on since we already got that done and everything's set here. So you're going to want to grab your ARP fastener assembly lube. You're going to want to grab this, and you want to put on all the bolts and make sure it's all on there. And when you have these caps off, you want to make sure that each cap goes with each rod. You don't want to get it confused or get the bolts confused, because That all matters. So make sure that your end is lined up, which another way to tell is you want to make sure that both of your tabs here are going to be lined up together. Oop, looks like our bearing here came up a little bit. So just make sure that that's straight in there before you put your cap on. So you got the cap on, you got it the correct way. Sit it in there. Make sure it's on there straight. And I like to finger tighten the bolts down. All right. And then I'll grab my ratchet once I get them tightened in, finger tight here. If you're having any problems with them, just make sure they're lined up correctly. Don't force nothing. Everything should go pretty smooth. You don't want to strip any of these bolts or you're in trouble. So now that they're there, you want to grab your ratchet here. And what I like to do is, I like to take them, just do one side, just barely a little quarter turn until they're all the way flushed up with the piston side of the rod. And then once they are flushed, which we are almost there, getting there, just want to take your time. I will wrist tighten them a little bit, you know. I already got that one kind of wrist tight. Then you come over, you grab your torque wrench. You're going to want to set it to 30 foot-pounds first. So let's get this thing set to 30. Where are we at? We are at 30. All right, there we go. Let's hit your torque wrench. This is just a basic torque wrench I got at, I don't know, just some hardware store. So it's nothing special. So you're going to want to come on your bolt. You're going to want to just nice and even each one until you get to your 30. We're at 30. 30. So after that, now you're going to want to, if you get it to 30, you're going to want to put it on, and you're going to want to, which I like to put it up at about noon. Then you're going to go 50 degrees of turn. So then also, the way I do it just to be safe is I set my torque wrench to 80 foot-pounds, because that's roughly where you're looking for. Let's see, 80. Okay, we're at 80. Lock her down. Let's just see where we're at when we turn it 50 degrees at 80 foot-pounds. So that was just about a perfect 50 degrees. Let's look at this one. So now we are all torqued down at 80 foot-pounds and about 50 degrees. Now we're going to want to turn it over. We want to make sure everything's spinning smoothly. Oop. There we go. Looks like we're spinning smoothly. And what you're going to want to check for is where we had a problem when we put these rods in the first time. You're going to want to look over here. This bolt comes up and hits the block. Let me grab a flashlight. This rod bolt comes up and would hit the block here, and that would not be good. So we had to clearance that section out there. Let's see if I can get it to turn over. Sorry about that. It's a little harder with some pistons in there. So coming around on this side, it also was hitting. We had to clearance that out. Now we are all clearanced. Everything should be good there. And the third spot it was hitting was down here. Let me see if I can show you in this one. It was hitting in the valley, right here where the cam would be, and on where the piston, the cylinder wall came up. The cylinder wall came up, we had to grind all that area out because it would come around and hit the side of the rod here. But now it looks like we are good. You can almost see how close everything is. So the thicker side of the rod was hitting down there. So we had to clearance both sides of that out. We had to clearance over here for that rod. Right here, we took some material out here for when they come back around the back side. It wasn't hitting, but it was pretty close, and as well over here. So when you have these stroker engines and these bigger rods, these are a lot more heavy duty than the old Oliver rods. The caps weren't as big on those, so I didn't have any problems there. So, and I'm gonna go show you what tools I used real fast. Basically, I used a die grinder with one of these carbine bits on it, and I got in there and for that section, and was able to get that. And then for the center section, I used an angle die grinder. I used a grinding disc, not this one here, but I was able to get in there and just be careful when I was making sure I wasn't going to hit the cylinder walls and scratch those up. And I think with that being said, we're going to go ahead and end this video. I'm not going to bore you with putting 8 more pistons in the hole, or 6 more at this point. So appreciate you watching the video. I hope you learned something. Comment below if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next video.